Like many born into privilege, John instinctively knew how to grow the business he had inherited. As a result, he had easily succeeded in expanding his father's business, scaling their company, and ensuring that their family fortune and investment continued to grow. But not without a price. In his quest for success, John lost friends and ruined relationships even. He figured, "I'll have time to make up for it later on." But one day, the doctors gave him devastating news, and it basically forced him to find an heir to his fortune. Fast. John had one goal throughout his entire life, which was to grow what he inherited from his father. Before we start, can we get this video to 1,000 likes? Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. At 25 years of age, he was given the responsibility of managing his family's business. It felt like a huge burden at that time, but John knew what his father would have wanted him to do. Despite having little knowledge and experience, John jumped into the business and took on the challenge he thought he never could. Fast forward to 5 decades, the restaurant had a legacy of its own by now. John managed to expand his father's business throughout the nation and started 2 more restaurants in his own hometown. John centered his life around his family's business. It became such an obsession for him that he started neglecting personal relationships. It wasn't long before even the closest relatives started to break ties with him. He lost friends and barely even formed romantic relationships. If this loneliness wasn't enough of a burden for him, John's age finally caught up to him. Although he was still healthy for someone in his late 70s. One day, John woke up feeling immense pain in his abdomen. John was taken to the ER immediately, and the doctors there broke some seriously bad news to the millionaire. He had been suspecting something was wrong with his body recently, but he never did anything about it, hoping it would go away itself. By the time it was discovered, the matter had gotten out of hand. John was on a ticking clock. His death was coming in fast. It was revealed that he had a severe infection that had grown significantly in his body. Although the exact time John had left was unknown, it seemed that he had but a couple of months to wrap things up in life. The hardest part was that John had to confront all of this alone, with no friends or family to depend upon for emotional care. The millionaire was forced to rethink his priorities in life. The restaurant chain he had built throughout his life won't be going with him into the grave. It seemed that he spent his entire life working for something so temporary, and it wasn't worth it. John could now either give away all of his money to donations and spend the rest of his days in a ward awaiting the strike of death, or he could have someone commit to the restaurant's legacy that he spent years growing. He desired that the business should continue even after he was gone, but who will take the lead? While he was being treated in the hospital, a light bulb shone above his head. This idea he got was absurd, but did absurdities even matter anymore? After weeks of darkness, the millionaire got up from bed and decided to set things straight in his life once and for all. John didn't have blood relatives to count on. The only people he was close to were the ones who handled the operations of his restaurants. His idea of finding a successor involved the employees who worked for him. This scheme would allow John to leave this world with contentment in his heart. John's employees had been working for him for years, and by now, he had an idea about the type of people they were. John's idea was to test these people and determine who is the worthiest to become his successor. This did sound a bit foolish, but at this point, nothing really mattered for John except finding a suitable heir to his business. Note that his plan was still to donate half of his wealth, while the rest of it would go to the unnamed heir. The main point was to keep the candidates unaware that a test is being conducted on them. John obviously couldn't join while looking like himself, which is why he got a makeover. So he disguised himself as a homeless man. He took off his classy suit, hid his luxurious car, and got a poor haircut to fit into the homeless man's look. Now, nobody could look at John and even think that he's a wealthy millionaire who owns several restaurants across the nation. As he sat across the street with a cup in his hand, the stares he received from bystanders were enough to break his heart. John sat there hoping his restaurant employees don't disappoint him, but his hopes were proved false. John entered one of his own restaurants nearby and decided to speak to the manager. However, before words even came out of his mouth, the manager screamed at him, forcing him to leave. The guards came into the frame and took John out of the place. The millionaire was baffled by the behavior of his very own employees. He had known the manager for a long time and always thought of him to be a polite and generous man, but it certainly looked like he was anything but. John felt lost in his thoughts. Did he really hire these people to run his restaurant? After being treated so harshly, John thought of revealing the truth to the staff. He asked the manager to fulfill one last request of his, which was to call the owner of the place. The manager was surprised to hear this odd request. John explained the reason behind his request, that he was once a loyal customer of the restaurant and a friend of the owner. Despite being given a red flag in the beginning, John was pushed by his instincts to continue with the social experiment. So he gave it a second chance. However, this time things would be a little different. John went to one of his small restaurants now and tried to enter from the back door. As he got close to it, he was pushed away by the restaurant's security guard. This was now looking like a recap of his previous experience in the experiment. However, John was unaware that he was being watched this time. Julie, who was around the sidewalk, noticed John being pushed away as she was eating food. She waved her hand at John and grabbed his attention. John wasn't expecting kindness at this point, which is why Julie's gesture surprised him. The stranger called John and generously invited him to have some of her lunch. John was astonished at Julie's compassionate nature. John sat down with Julie and the two shared lunch together. Julie told him that she had been employed as a dishwasher in the restaurant for half a year and often helped in the kitchen as well. But she shared that she dreamt of owning her own restaurant one day. Unfortunately, this dream was far from being fulfilled because her business partner left her penniless. John quietly listened to Julie's story, and he felt as if he couldn't be anywhere else right now. His meeting with Julie was like the perfect ending to the puzzle. The social experiment was looking at its end. John realized that nobody could be a better fit at continuing his legacy than this individual he met. He knew he had found the one in Julie was the perfect successor. John decided to reveal the truth to Julie, and after he did, she couldn't respond. All she did was stare at him as she processed what just happened. John started to take off his hat and old coat, revealing his true identity. He explained everything to Julie. The restaurant owner mentioned how he had just a couple of months to live because he had a severe infection inside him. The social experiment was now completed, and Julie was chosen by John to take over the business. Julie, who had a tough time handling finances, was having a hard time believing that a millionaire disguised as a homeless man was about to hand over his empire to her. The course of her career had shifted from one point to another, all because of a small kind gesture. Julie committed to the responsibility and assured John that she won't disappoint. John was waiting for so long to hear these words of reassurance, and now he was relieved that his restaurant chain is under the leadership of someone worthy. Unfortunately, John passed away a couple of weeks following this event. Julie took over the restaurants and started changing things. This was the change that John would have wanted to see. Under her leadership, she made it a point to teach her team about compassion and empathy, especially when it came to the less fortunate. She went one step further and even launched a restaurant to serve the homeless. The food provided at this restaurant was pretty much free of cost, but gave the poor a sense of equality. John left this world long ago, but if he was around, he'd know that the world appreciates him for setting things straight in the last days of his life.